So tonight we are in the presence of royalty. Along with Guerilla Hendo, this man is responsible for the establishment of Guerilla Cricket, and indeed, we have a T-shirt, a tea towel, a sticker, you name it. We've got everything that says we get on air because of the bear, and indeed we do. Welcome to Nigel Walker, better known as the Bear.
Good evening, afternoon. Oh,
good to have you on board, Bear. I'd like to take you back to the days of the young Bear, before indeed Bear was probably a name for you. So the young Nigel Walker, how did you get involved with sport and cricket in particular all those years ago?
well, I mean, I guess as a kid, Cubs and all that sort of stuff, played footy as a kid. And my first experience of cricket actually was my brother coming. I remember this vividly. My brother, when I was probably about 9, my brother came through. I was at a friend's house. He came through the door and there was blood spewing out of his mouth. And he said he got hit by a cricket ball. And he'd been at school, during the holidays, we used to have play groups and all that kind of stuff. And at my junior, so he must have been at my junior school. So he must have been 11. So I must have been 8. And he came back and he just blood everywhere. And he's like, I got hit in the mouth by a cricket ball. Someone threw a cricket ball at me. And I was like, that's a bit weird. Da 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 da. But then I guess my first experience, I mean, I remember vaguely bits of the 1976 West Indies series, but the first time I really got into cricket was 81 Ashes, both of them's Ashes.
How old were you then?
I was 10, turning 11. No, I'd have been 11. Oh, I'd have been 10. It's 81, wasn't it? And of course, in England in those days, there's 3 channels, and cricket was on all day during the summer, and there's bugger all to do in the summer.
Yep.
And I remember sitting there watching that, and I remember the Headingley Test, and I remember watching us bowl out the Australians for whatever it was, 120 or whatever it was, and it was just really, really, really exciting.
Yeah.
And then I started getting into it, and I joined local club under 11s, and then I played at school when I started senior school, went to grammar school, and cricket was the summer sport. And I was originally picked out as a bowler. You know how it goes. So when you start senior school, basically they pick out people who can play, and then they decide what you're going to be. So I was going to be a bowler, and then in typically school fashion, you play the first 2 games, and actually, if you don't do the thing you're picked for, then you never get to do it again, right?
Yep.
So I was picked as a bowler, and then no one put me on to bowl for the first 2 games. And then I was the kind of that utility player who stood on the boundary, batted at 10 or 11, and never got to bowl. And it was getting quite annoying. And then I remember and then when I was about 13, 14, my club went on a tour down to Somerset. And finally I got to bowl in a game, and I took about 4 wickets in this game. And then suddenly I was a bowler again, which is what I was originally picked for. When I was about, so I'd have been 14 under 15s.
What sort of bowling were you doing at the time?
I was doing left arm spin, but in those days I had quite a long run up, and I toyed with it for a while. I was I figured that if you bowled in, sort of tried to bowl medium pace with a bit of cut on it, you could kind of get away with it, but it didn't really work. And then the club sort of worked on me, and I became a proper left arm spinner. And then over the next, 4 years from then until I left school, I was kind of stalwart as first go-to spinner to, God knows how many 5-footers for club and school and stuff. And that's how I really got into it. And then at that point, I was playing, I think, probably 6 days a week. If I wasn't training, I was playing a game. We usually had 2 club games in a week, 2 school games in a week. And then so I was playing adult cricket at the weekend, Saturday, Sunday. If I wasn't playing school on a Saturday, if I was playing school on Saturday, I'd play school on Saturday, club on a Sunday. We'd have midweek games with school as well on a Wednesday, and then we'd have 1 or 2 games for the age group as well. So we were under 15s, under 13s, under 15s, under 17s at club. And the club I played for, weirdly, my school team, we had 5 or 6 players who were playing county age cricket as well. So we had a really good couple of fast bowlers. We had the wicket keeper I had, who I always talk about on the show. He ended up being South of England wicket keeper. He was an amazing keeper to spinners. He was such quick hands. I got so many stumpings in those days. It was great. And then so we were really good. And so our club every year we either won Hertfordshire and Middlesex titles, or we won Hertfordshire and didn't. And sometimes when you were under 15s, you'd play as 14-year-olds, and sometimes we'd miss out on one that year, but the next year we win both. So I was used to winning loads, and we had a really successful team. And I played a couple of years. I got into the Hertfordshire age group squad as well. Played a couple of games for them. And then when I went to university, I kind of, got hammered. Everyone knows my story. I got cane. I went to Manchester in the 1990s. Used to go to Hacienda. Can't remember a lot of it. Got absolutely spammed for about 3 years. And kind of gave up. I did play university cricket, but I went to UMIS and they were really crap. I even opened a batting one game for them for some reason.
Off your face.
And I had back spasms because I was taking so many drugs basically that the one game I turned up and I bent over and I was out there for about 12 overs and scored about 4 runs and then spooned one up to mid off and had to go home and rub a load of deep heat on my back because I was basically bent over double. And then when I kind of basically clubbing and that usual early 20s stuff kind of took over. And I didn't play until I went back and I joined Dan Norcross. I met at a game of poker that a friend of mine's wife knew Dan, and I went over to his place and we were playing poker and he was saying he played cricket and he played for a club. I tried playing for a club up in North London, but it took me 2 hours to get to a game in Barnet and I was living in South London. And I had a shit game. I think Clive Radley was playing in that game as well and he spanked me all over the place. And I was like, I'm not doing that every week. That's just too far to travel for a game of cricket. Yeah. But then I met Dan and literally Honour Oak Cricket Club and all that is literally around the corner on the South Circuit from me. It's 10 minutes from my house. And so it was kind of like, okay, I'm going to go. And Dan really wanted to spin and I didn't have any spinners. And then the next thing I did, I was back taking down, I got the club record in the first year I played. I got 42 wickets at about 12 in the first season I played for them. And I became a stalwart there and I really enjoyed it. And at the time I was single, didn't have kids. Good social scene after the games and all that kind of stuff. So I played there and I retired again when I was 46, I think. So I played for another 20 years.
That's not
and really enjoyed it.
I've got to say, I've spoken to about a dozen people so far, and you're really the first one who's had what could be called anything close to a career in club cricket. Everybody else has played cricket and done it for the social side of things, but not been necessarily great performers, although I may do them injustice because they may not have spoken about it. But the social side of it, the connection, the being with people to talk about cricket, to just have a drink afterwards, whatever it is almost as important as the cricket itself for most people.
Nah, for me, it was the competitive. I mean, this is it when I was young and all that stuff I was talking about, because we used to win a lot. It was quite serious for me. And there were 2 things I wanted to do in life. One was either be a rock star or be a professional cricketer. Now, when I left doing the cricket, I did have obviously I trained as a sound engineer. So I had a studio in my house and I was trying to do music, but that never turned out. I didn't like club. Basically, when I started doing it, everything was club music, and I used to play guitar and stuff. So I didn't really, that wasn't really my thing. But then everyone was doing program music, and I just couldn't get into it. So I did that for about 7 years, and then ended up working in telly because I was a sound recorder. And so that's when I went back to cricket. And for me, it was all about the competition. I couldn't play Sunday games, for example. I couldn't play social cricket. It didn't interest me at all. It had to be competitive. That's why I liked league cricket, because there was something on it on a Saturday, And it's in the end, that's why I gave up. I was playing in a team. I was probably when I quit at 46, I was probably one of the youngest members in the side that I was playing it. And again, this is something I mentioned on air at all. You live in London. The kids don't really want to play cricket. They got too many things to do on a Saturday. I mean, it takes up your whole Saturday. I mean, sometimes you leave home at 10 in the morning and you don't get back till 9 at night. And they got better things to do. Whereas when you go out of town and there's nothing to do, some of the sides you play would be full of, when we were playing a couple of years before I ended, I remember going to Cranley one year and we played a side and we lost. And we were playing a side who were basically made up of 20 somethings.
Yep.
And we were a side of 40 somethings, and and you lose them 40, 50, 60 runs in the field because everyone's so bloody slow and can't see the goddamn ball. And and actually at that point it becomes a bit of a chore and everyone starts having a go at each other. And I just thought, you know what, you need younger people to play cricket, and I just can't be doing this anymore. Plus Guerilla took over.
Well, talking of Guerilla, let's go back a step. Where did you first come into connection with the sofa?
Through Dan. Dan basically wanted to set up Test Match Sofa. He just left his job, and he had this idea that he wanted to do. His brother lived in the States, and he couldn't get hold of the BBC, and this is where the whole idea started from. And he said, "I want to do an online commentary for the Ashes." And his idea was that everyone would pay. I think he wanted to charge 10 quid for the series, or 10 quid a Test match. You got to remember, there wasn't a lot of online radio in those days.
Yeah.
And finding servers. This is it. Just in the 11 years since. Well, no, we started Test Match Sofa in 2009. So in the 12 years since, the amount of things you can do online is just incredible.
Yeah.
The amount of it's changed. But I remember we had to find a server where we could, connect to send it out. TuneIn Radio didn't exist until we found it, and we couldn't get on Apple Radio, and we got in touch with TuneIn, and it was like, oh, we're going to get on, and literally within 24 hours they're like, yes, you can come on. And we were one of the biggest stations on TuneIn to start with. They used to love us. No, now everyone's on it, and we're not as high up the list as we were. But so we started it in his room, in his lounge, and there was about 6 of us for the first summer. And basically, I had a load of studio kit knocking around the house.
Yep.
And old TV gear and stuff like that, so I could donate some of it. And we used to have the big old mixing desk we had sitting on his table in the lounge. We all had sort of radio mics in those days. We used to have to hold. The problem with this has always been that you're dealing with a bunch of amateurs trying to do professional sound. And I remember when Test Match Sofa moved into the TV studios, when we couldn't do it at Dan's place, and he couldn't afford to rent the flat anymore that we had. That was another old flat I had, funny enough. And and then we got bought by the cricketer. They moved into the TV studios, and I remember the TV guy there, who sadly died now, died of cancer. But he was like, "Can't you just put them on radio mics?" And I was like, "Well, you can try it, but all you're going to get is a bunch of rustle, because people just forget that they're wearing mics." And sure enough, we did it for a morning, and I remember Manny sitting there just slouched back, just constantly banging his mic and forgetting that it was there, and doing all that. And I was just like, you just can't do this. Just go back to having mics on sticks or something, because you're just going to get loads of interference, and it's really annoying for the listener. So
it sounded an awful lot of fun, though.
Oh yeah, it was. And Nestle Boy was our first emailer.
Yeah, he's talked about that, which will be going to air for Patreon shortly, about how he was the very first one, and even before Twitter was in existence, effectively.
Yeah, well, this is it. People had to get in touch via email, and he was quite a regular emailer, and not many other people did. And then we discovered Twitter, I think, after about a year.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we get a Twitter account, It's amazing, isn't it? The things that have come up in the actual time that we've been on air, and how things have changed. It's just
Well, I was, everything from the number of jingles that we have, which the archive is massive and doesn't include everything by any means.
No.
Through to the number of people who've actually been through Guerilla Cricket over the years. It's
exactly.
a hell of a lot of people when you think about it.
And you think of the people who've gone on to be professional broadcasters as well. They should bloody pay us, mate. The BBC and all these other people should be paying us to be a school for people, really.
Well, in a way, that's true. But then again, when they go to the BBC, they lose something, don't they? The freedom to actually say what you want to say, to swear, to have the fun that we have is something you're never going to get on a broadcaster like that, are you?
No, and that's why it's important to me. And I remember having this conversation with Dan when he basically wanted to be on Test Match Special. That was kind of, I guess, his driving goal right from the beginning. He wanted to be a professional sports world. And I get that because he wanted to get paid and all this kind of stuff. And for me, it wasn't so important.
Yeah.
I had a job working in TV, and I do property and stuff, and I've always been quite self-sufficient anyway. But for me, we were on a crossing paths going in the opposite direction. I was actually at the end of my tether with TV. I was a sound recordist, and you spent your life trying to brown nose people to keep getting jobs and all that kind of shit. And it's just a pain in the ass. You have to be really nice to producers and all this kind of shit. And I'm a short, fat guy who, everyone knows, crack the bear. My arse is always hanging out my trousers and stuff. And to start with, when I started, you could get away with that because you're just doing a job and you're there to do a job and you're head of your department and all this kind of stuff because you're an individual just doing the sound. And so you can kind of get away with it. And I had a steady job and Homes Under the Hammer and stuff. But as TV changed, it became less and less. You became less and less required. So many more jobs. Lots of jobs didn't really have set sound recorders. So suddenly, everyone was self-producing. Cameramen didn't get hired anymore. Sound recorders weren't so important. You just get someone to clip a mic on and put it straight in the camera and all this sort of shit. So it became harder and harder to get a job. I mean, I was on with diary service and all that, and you get hired for a couple of jobs, but you never got hired back. And what I realized was, if you got hired through your diary service, for example, you were always the stopgap because their normal guy who they always use couldn't work on that job that day. So you were just a stopgap. So you never got called back on that again. And you know what? After a few years, I did it I started working in TV in 99, and the last job I did for Homes Under the Hammer was 2013. And I had 14 years, and by the end of it, I kind of lost my tether. So I didn't want to work in media anymore. I'd seen how it worked. And Dan was on the opposite path. And that's what I enjoyed about Guerilla, is the fact that you can say what you want and you can be who you want.
Yeah.
And you don't have to abide by anyone else's bloody rules, I hate rules. I'm an anarchist. Well, I'm not an anarchist, but
I know what you mean. And if you don't have to worry if you've got somebody's average wrong by 2 decimal points. Because that's not what people are listening to Guerilla for. They can go to TMS if they want to hear that sort of stuff.
My motto is never prepare, Tony. Jared, there you go. Merci. I never prepare. I don't take notes. As a series goes on, you remember things from the series anyway. The TV puts up those are the stats as it is anyway. And Twitter, if we get something wrong, Twitter will always tell us we're wrong anyway. That's not the truth.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Twitter really does set Guerilla apart. Along with the jingles, the interaction with Twitter is something that you don't get anywhere else, do you?
No. And it was always thus. And that, you're right, that is what makes a difference. And it's what makes it fun,
Yeah. So I just want to go back to a couple of your personal experiences. First time you can recall going to a senior match, a test match or a big county game or something?
God, you know what? I do remember the first time I ever went to a game, I went with a mate called David Miles. His dad took us to a Middlesex game. I must have been 14. I remember Wayne Daniel was bowling and we were stood at square leg and I couldn't see the ball because he was so damn quick. I can't even remember who won, but I do remember I enjoyed myself.
Yeah.
And this is something else. I almost prefer watching sport on. I've done so much of this on the telly.
Yeah.
When I go to the grounds, I remember going. We got tickets through the club scheme here to go and see a Surrey T20 a couple of years ago before the pandemic, and I was trying to get Nate into cricket, my son. And we went there, and I found it all a bit discombobulating. A, there was a crowd, and I'm not really a crowds person anyway. And B, there's no replays, and I don't get to see any of that. And I just find it's like I'm lost. I'm totally lost.
We get so spoiled by the TV, don't we?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And I like watching it with other people, which of course we do on Guerilla. It's nice to watch sport with other people. I mean, I did enjoy doing the World Cup. I mean, I've mentioned it a few times on there, but I really enjoyed the World Cup. And there, you see, because we were in the comm box, we had all the replays as well. So you got to watch the live thing, and you could nip out into the crowd. Yeah. You had space because you had your comms box with no one in it. So if you just wanted to chill out, you could chill out in the comms box. You could go out and get the atmosphere. And then when you were watching it, they had all the stats on a screen and the TV thing, the TV feed as well. So you got all the replays. It's the best of both worlds, really.
So and I think I know what the answer to this is going to be, but what's your most memorable experience watching a match?
Well, it'll be the World Cup final, funnily enough.
Thought it might. Yeah. Were you on air at the time, or
no? The thing was, if Barry ever listens to this, the thing was, I did say I could commentate, but and obviously I can, but the first day we set up for the World Cup, we were in Cardiff, and I turned up, and those guys were so fucking disorganized, man. I mean, they were a really nice bunch of guys, but I mean, we turned up at the first game, and I said to the guy who was in charge, he wasn't Barry, it was I can't remember his name, Sean Morris, I think. And I said to him, so where are we sending this feed? And he said, oh, I don't know. And I said, what do you mean you don't know? I said, well, this has got to go somewhere so that the radio stations can pick it up. So, well, we haven't organised that. I was like, you're the World Cup broadcasters, and you don't know where you're sending this. At which point, the World Cup broadcast, they basically became Guerilla Cricket. I literally said, okay, well, I can do this. They didn't even have it. You know, they'd asked for hardwire internet to go into the computer. That wasn't there. There was only the wireless from the ground, which didn't work because obviously loads of people are there.
Yeah.
And go away. You might have to cut that bit. My son's just walked in the room.
Oh, no, it's all part of the colour.
Okay. And then, so we didn't have any internet, and they didn't have anywhere to say it. So basically, I had to go and get a station like we had for Guerilla Cricket. So I went to the Vodcast, the place that we use, signed up, got us a channel ID, and then I had to go into town and buy, portable internet on one of those, 4G roaming things. So I went out and bought one of them, came back, plugged it all up, and on the way back, I was so fucking stressed out. I was like skinning up a reefer and driving around Cardiff and smoking. I got back to the ground. I was pretty bombed after this, and I was like, oh god. I think Barry told me to go on air, and I was on air with Fred, who I kept calling Fred, even though he was Alan for the world public, but to me he was still Fred, and he kept correcting me. And I think we were doing Sri Lanka versus Bangladesh. I think it was Sri Lanka versus Bangladesh in the gloaming in Cardiff. We were supposed to have the TV feed, but the guy was such a tight ass, even though he's worth 300 million quid, that he hadn't bought us what they call the fruit machine. The fruit machine is basically the TV feed and the stat screen that comes up with broadcasters. So we didn't have that either. And it was virtually dark. I mean,
it sounds like it was all being done with the sort of duct tape and lucky bands. And
it was more unprofessional than Guerilla Cricket. It really was. It was like. And so we were doing it, and I was just stoned, and Fred was trying to get comments out. I mean, I was just bloody exhausted, and my head was going on in all sorts of places. And I think Barry after that thought he just can't commentate, and it wasn't like I couldn't commentate. I was just stoned, and I was just exhausted from doing shit, and so I didn't really get another chance to do anything, which is all right actually, because when you're concentrating on being that sort. And the other thing is, of course, for that whole World Cup, I had to have TeamViewer up, and to get us on air. If Knackle wasn't in the studio. So every morning because we used to go on 20 minutes early for the World Cup. And then for Guerilla, we obviously used to go on 10 minutes early. So I get everything up for the World Cup, make sure that was all working. And then I get on my computer, fucking log into the desktops in Guerilla Towers, and I'd be setting them up and getting us to go on air in the Guerilla Towers. It's a fucking nightmare, mate. And we also had the bet of the day, which I had to be organising because we had that thing.
That's right. Yeah.
So I had to be doing that as well, making the graphics for that whilst I was doing the one. And it was a crazy time. Really crazy time. It was fun. But it was quite a crazy time, man.
By the time you got to the final, presumably you had it down to a fairly fine art and wasn't so demanding.
No, and obviously Knackle was in for the final, so I didn't have to do anything. And although weirdly, I do remember turning up to the final, and the thing about Lords is they have some firewall thing, and I do remember that from when we did that West Indies Hurricane game. And one of the ports is locked off, so you can't get onto normal internet or sort of streaming the way we do it was often blocked. So I knew that, so I had to sort that out. And then I use this thing called an SQM, which is like a location mixer for location recording, was what I was using for the World Cup broadcast. And strangely, having it plugged into the mains, there was this massive buzz coming off it. And I was like, this is a bit weird. It hadn't happened all tournament. And I'm not sure if it was the electrics at Lords or that the charger had gone down. But I mean, that was going on for about half an hour. And I was getting the BBC guy going in and going, what's this buzz? You know, because we were getting a feed from them and no one knew what it was. And eventually I just had to get battery power and it was fine. But yeah, it was generally after I got after I got everything sorted, it was all cool wherever we went.
Yeah.
You know, there was the you know, the whole thing about that. You know, the Pakistan-India game. We turn up the Pakistan-India game, and again, this is because the guy was running as a complete tight ass. He hadn't actually paid for his rights, even though he bought the rights from the ICC. He hadn't actually given them any money, right?
Oh, Jesus.
So they wanted money off him. So we're turning up to Old Trafford to do the India-Pakistan game. Adam Collins was on our crew for this game.
Yeah,
and he's a really nice guy, but he gets very stressed, right?
Yeah.
And we turn up there, we go out to the gate, and we're told we're not allowed in. Well, we're not allowed in, right? And it turns out we haven't paid our bill. So then we get in touch, and I'm with Barry and this other assistant producer type person we have. And so we phone up Sean, the guy's in charge, and he goes, "Don't worry, I've got a check for the ICC. When I get to the ground, it'll all be okay."
Oh,
so he gets there. Literally, the game started. I can't remember if it started at 10:30 or 11 or whatever, but we got permission to get into the ground about 25 minutes before the game started.
Jeez.
So then we had to lug all the shit up to the commentary box. Collins is going mental, going, "Where have you been? You know, we ought to be on air," and you know, da 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 da. And I'm just running around plugging shit in everywhere whilst everyone's schmoozing around. You know, and we managed to get on air in time. It's it can be quite crazy, some of these things.
Well, for all of that, you came out of that with enough anecdotes to fill any number of rain delays during Guerilla broadcasts.
True.
So, yeah.
I think everyone's heard them a lot, though, haven't they? Yeah, but you know.
So one other thing, then, your favourite Test match, and I also think I know the answer to this one.
Ooh, favourite Test match? That's a tricky one. I've seen so many
that you've been.
I'd say
that you've been at.
That I've been at. I haven't been to that many Test matches.
There's one particular one you were at. In company, across the Irish Sea.
Oh, of course. What am I on about? Yeah, the Irish Test match. That was again. That was quite a stressful time for me. I really enjoyed it. I mean, that was such a steal as well, wasn't it? I mean, the fact that we could get those rights. I've got to thank Dave Brooke for that, because I mean, we wouldn't have had a chance with that. And we got really lucky. I mean, to be able to get the rights to a Test match for 500 quid, you know, it's astonishing. Really is astonishing. I mean, the whole experience is brilliant. Driving across there with the car, taking all the kit. But then there was technical shit there again. You know, it was like the internet went down. I remember it might have been you who was sort of tweeting us or Facebooking us from across the seas, going, "You realise you've gone down," and then it turned out that the ground. The ground
got struck by lightning or something, didn't you?
Well, that was on the first day. Yeah, they told us to clear out the commentary box because lightning was coming, and everyone cleared off, and I was still doing stuff in the commentary box. It's a Faraday cage, man. It was a square. It was a box. I wasn't going to get electrocuted on the inside, so I had to do stuff in there. But it turned out that the internet there was done sort of microwave internet by these bloody big stanchions, and they'd gone down, and they were down for about 2 hours. And so that, again, you have to. This is the problem when you're running a show live. It's a lot harder.
Yeah,
I don't think I commentated on that much at all, because you basically got to run all the technical shit. You're doing it live. It's a lot easier when we're doing it in the studio back home. But I got into my professional audio engineer mode when we're doing it live, and so it's a lot easier to just do that and not worry about having to talk about the game at the same time. Yeah.
Well, if I recall correctly, the youth wing of Guerilla Cricket got into professional drinking mode at one stage and made a mess of it.
Yeah, there was a lot of that going on. I remember Taz came back and threw up in the sink at about 6 a.m. Knackle got himself in a state one night. And Rog, of course, was just, alcohol central, as you can imagine. There was a lot of that going on. There's a lot of hangovers. And there was one night that was really enjoyable. We were all, I think after the first night of play, we were all sat back and everyone was really buzzing and excited. And we were all in the kitchen. And drinking went on to about 2 or 3 a.m. But you can get away with it. I mean, so many people
Yeah.
came out of woodwork to come across and pay for their way to go to Ireland because it was just a big thing. But I mean, this brings me on to what's going on in India now. I mean, you think bloody Guerilla Cricket South Africa got given, and I say given, the rights to the bloody to the India South Africa India Test series. It's fucking insane.
Absolutely. But hey, take what you can get.
Well, exactly. Christ, I wish the ECB would give us some rights. Just a big series.
Don't hold your breath.
No, I'm not.
So, just a couple of things before we wrap up. Your favourite jingles?
Oh, favourite jingles. I've always liked Warner.
Yeah.
I like some of the old ones.
I'll do a clip of that because if it's done out of context, Bear saying I've always liked Warner is something that would make most people fall over.
Won't understand. Yeah, exactly. But some of the old ones are the best. You know, Samet is an absolute classic, even if it's too long. I love Ben Stokes one. That's a great. I mean, there was some. You know, I remember when Perko started doing jingles for us.
Yep.
I mean, it reminded me at Voges, for example, when we were doing the Ashes. I mean, that's some of them are actually genius. And when Perko first started, he did that whole Sergeant Pepper, thing, and some of the Sri Lankan players from them.
Perko explained to me yesterday that when he first started doing them, he didn't realize they were supposed to be short. So he was into writing full songs for the players.
I know. Well, he did. He always used to send us short and long. And long was the entire song, and short was about 40 seconds.
Yeah.
Which is fine. You can get away with it in a test match.
Yeah.
And this is what it's got to be said, the Zoom thing kind of takes away the energy for jingles sometimes because you guys often don't hear them. That's also we've had so many people in now who've never been in the studio and don't kind of get the jingle thing.
Yeah.
But I find myself not playing as many now, or I just play them underneath because people can't hear them. Unless someone actually asks me for a jingle. Boundaries is a lot easier. But when people are actually don't sort of introduce a jingle, it becomes hard to try and hoodwink it. And you can stick your hand up and go like this as much as you like. No one's paying fucking attention. So, you kind of do it how it is. Yeah. But it's the way it goes.
And finally, your favourite cricketers all time?
Favourite cricketers of all time. There are some strange ones I like. I mean, I Joe Root would have to be a favourite at the moment. People like Alistair Cook. I know he scored a whole lot of runs, but people, I like professional cricketers who do professional shit. Jimmy Anderson's another one.
Yeah, Jimmy's a legend.
I like characters as well, and I like the Australian side at the moment. I really like Pat Cummins. I know I'm not supposed to like Australians, and I've got a lot of respect for Piggy Smith, even though I slate him a lot. And people like that.
And Williamson.
Kane Williamson, I love Kane Williamson. Yeah. And I like Trent Bolt. I've got to say, New Zealand are one of my favourite teams, just because of how they produce. Mind you, they're getting beaten by Bangladesh. I noticed. I like Jason Holder as someone I really respect in the cricket world. He kind of, his stature in West Indies cricket and the way he holds that lot together, or when he was captain anyway. And I don't understand why they don't pick him for more T20s. He's a really good T20 player.
And the Indians?
Not many South Africans. Indians, I kind of like Rishabh Pant.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see that KL Rahul has seemed to have cemented his place as an opener. I always thought he had a great technique, and he always looked like he should succeed at Test cricket, and then kept getting it in and out the side. Seems to have done that. Jasprit Bumrah is a classy player, and I like the way they interview on the TV as well. You can't dislike them when they interview. I mean, they got a smile and they're the smiling assassin type thing. When he got questioned about bouncing Jimmy Anderson with the no balls last year, it was quite funny. It's like, I didn't mean to, but
right.
And it's like people like that. I mean, Curtly Ambrose, Courtney Walsh, favourites of mine going back. And obviously, you go way back. People like Viv Richards, Clive Lloyd. and the Great West Indian team. Can't
Yeah.
knock any of those.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
I've said Ian Botham, but I can't stand the man after,
It's a shame, isn't it, that people can be great cricketers, but just really shit in their own nest afterwards.
Yes,
With their
exactly.
behavior. You know, you look at someone like Shane Warne, who's just an amazing bowler, or Michael Vaughan. You know, the way they behave since then has just made it really hard to keep liking them in any way.
I know. Yeah, I do think that. I mean, Shane Warne, I like it when he talks. I like listening to him when he talks about spin bowling, but anything else,
absolutely.
It's,
Well, I'd just like to say thank you, Ben, not just for your time tonight, but for the work that you've put in to make Guerilla what it is and to bring us all together, because that's really what it is. It's a family of people enjoying the company of one another while watching the cricket. It's actually as much about the company as it is about the cricket. And if it hadn't been for what you've done, none of that would have ever happened. So I just want to say thank you so much for all of that, Bear. And long may you continue to be doing it with us.
That was always the original intention and the original ethos of the show, and it's my pleasure to do it.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
All right, mate. Thanks a lot.